My uncle was murdered by Mr. Woodcock, who shot him 3 times behind while he was going down the stairs when he was walking in his own home. The death traumatized our family. My grandfather, Armand Cole Sr., died soon afterward. My grandmother spiraled down in tremendous grief and never regained full control of her mind. The police told our family that Mr. Woodcock was a murderer for hire who was implicated in several other killings in various states. Our understanding was Mr. Woodcock received a life sentence with no possibility of parole. But amazing to me, my cousin Scott told me upon hearing of a possibility of a pardon that he would support this request if he could meet in person with Mr. Woodcock and see if he would apologize to him for his crime. Scott traveled across the country for this meeting, received no apology from Mr. Woodcock. Our family humbly asks the board for justice. Please deny this request.
We are about to watch the parole hearing of a decorated veteran, one who served both in the Marines and the Army, but serving a life sentence for that killing. And as you heard, he was accused of being a pay for hire with potentially many more under his belt. But before we watch this parole hearing, we are going to take a blast to the past to his September 2023 commutation hearing, and it's led by the one and only, the Honorable Judge Jackson. With that, let's jump in.
How old are you, Mr. Woodcock?
I'm 83 years old, ma'am.
And how long have you been incarcerated on this charge?
I've been locked up for 43 years.
That's the same information that I have, that you were 40 years old when you were arrested for this crime. You have been incarcerated for 43 years, and now you're 83. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, who was the victim in this case?
Mr. Armand Cole.
And who was Mr. Armand Cole to you?
Mr. Armand Cole was married to my sister, Betty Cole, and
So he was your brother-in-law, is that correct?
yes, ma'am. One I didn't really know.
Well, but in fact, he was your brother-in-law, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
How long had your sister been married to Mr. Cole?
I don't know, ma'am.
Your sister was also charged in connection with Mr. Cole's death. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
She was convicted of conspiracy, and she received a 20-year sentence. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Woodcock, would you please tell us what happened in this case? How did you come to take Mr. Cole's life? Tell us what happened.
Well, during that time, I was under the influence of alcohol. Plus, I had medical problems with my ex-wife.
Stop talking right there. What do you mean medical problems with your ex-wife?
She was seeing a psychiatrist, and I was saying the same thing.
You
Psychiatrist. And it was a problem with her being a stealing money.
all right. So what did that have to do with your committing this crime?
That comes from me and my fall partner, John Paul Fallon. And there was a conspiracy between the two of us that I would take and kill his father-in-law, and he would take and kill Mr. Cole.
And why would you want to kill Mr. Cole since you say you barely knew him? Why would you be interested in killing your brother-in-law?
It was an agreement between myself and Paul Fallon. His father-in-law was retired from the railroad people in Pennsylvania, and he had a lot of money. And Paul Fallon wanted it. And between the two of us, we figured we could make some money out of it. Even if we had to take and borrow it for my sister, for me, and he would take and get it from his wife.
So, okay, let's stop for just a moment, because you've lost me, because none of this is making a lot of sense to me. Who wanted your brother-in-law killed?
Didn't understand.
She's asking you about the conspiracy with Betty wanting her husband killed.
Not necessarily what I would consider a conspiracy between myself and my sister, but it come down to it that I was acting on information from her that she was telling me about her husband, Aubrey Cole.
And what was
And
that? What was that information?
Abuse, alcoholism, and also molesting young girl.
And so your sister made those accusations against the victim, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so why did that lead you to taking his life?
It was a deal between me and Paul Fallon. It was a simple deal where he would do something and I would do something, and we both gain from that actions of each other.
Well, again, I don't understand what Mr. Fallon had to do with your killing his brother-in-law and what you had to gain from Mr. Fallon killing his stepfather or whoever, father-in-law or whoever. You know, I don't understand how those are connected. But we'll move on. So how did you kill Mr. Cole?
Used a 25 automatic,
Well, that's,
25 caliber.
well, just tell us what happened. Where was he when you killed him? What are the circumstances? Tell us how you took his life.
What's she saying?
She wants you to explain the circumstances of the murder. Tell her what happened that day that you killed Mr. Cole. That's what she wants you to tell
Well, what happened was we were drinking and decided to go hunting over in West Mississippi at a government installation over there. We were drinking, we went to New Orleans, drink some more, and I was gonna take and borrow a rifle, a certain kind of rifle, which was a Henry 4440. And the person that had it was Mr. Armin Cole. And he had it down in his basement. When we got to the house, he said, yeah, come on in. And he went downstairs and we were up and back of
Who were you drinking with?
John Paul Fallon.
Okay, so you and Mr. Fallon went to Mr. Cole's house, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And what happened when you got to Mr. Cole's house?
He knocked on the door and he come to it and asked us what we were doing. And we told him, oh, we're here drinking and want to borrow the rifle, the 4440 Henry. And he said, yes, sure, come on. And he turned and went down the stairs. And I flipped out.
Well, when you flipped out
Aggravation
about what?
about my way of life. And also about my problems. Not only was I having problems with my wife, but I had problems with society as a general principle. I found out I made a very serious mistake when I retired after the Marine Corps. And
We're gonna talk about that in a minute. But you said that the reason you killed your brother-in-law was that your sister had told you some pretty bad things about Mr.
yes, ma'am.
Cole. And now you're telling us, oh, I just flipped out because my life was not going well. So which one is it?
Both.
Your sister was charged along with you, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. She was.
And the allegation was that the murder was committed for the insurance money on Mr. Cole. It had nothing to do with any abuse. It had nothing to do with any issues you were having. It was committed because there was a life insurance policy on Mr. Cole, and you all wanted to get the money.
Yes, ma'am. My sister received the money. And it was one of those things where I could borrow anything in money from her. And it was basically the same thing for Paul Fallon. I was to do him a favor by killing his father-in-law.
Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit. You were in the military.
Yes, ma'am.
And you had 2 stints in the military, is that correct?
Say again, ma'am?
You had 2 stints in the military.
You had 2 different stints in the
You were in the
military.
Army and then you were in the Marines.
I was in the Army and the Marines. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's what
I
I'm
did
trying to
3 years in the Army back
say.
in the 50s. And then I joined the Marine Corps and finished out 20 years.
Okay,
Retired.
okay, let's stop talking, So you did whatever your commitment was to the Army. And you were discharged from the Army, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
how long after that did you join the Marine Corps?
Approximately a year, maybe a little more.
And what made you join the Marine Corps? What made you go back into the military?
That was the safest place for me. And
What does that mean?
I like the idea of what I was going to do in the Marine Corps, which is reconnaissance work.
Well,
while I was-
why did you think that was the safest place for you to be?
I've had a friend of mine that was in the Marine Corps, plus I have my, one of my cousins, and I knew some people that had been in the Corps and got out. My attitude was ideal for me would be in the Marine Corps because I could take and go to different schools, and enjoy the training that I would have to do from boot camp until I retired.
Okay, so how long were you in the Marine Corps?
17 years, ma'am.
Okay, and you had the rank of E7?
E7, yes, ma'am.
And then you retired due to alcohol and family issues. Tell us about that. Why did you end up retiring from the Marine Corps?
Well, I've been drinking for 4 or 5 years while I was in the Corps. And I was having problem with my ex-wife. And she was seeing a psychiatrist. Plus, I caught her in a lot of lies. And it wasn't good for the children. She had 3 girls of her own, and I had 2 sons. So it was 5 children.
Okay. Well, what part did alcohol play in your retirement? As you mentioned alcohol, so
Yes,
what part did alcohol play in your retirement?
it influenced my decisions. One was I didn't want the children to be left hanging because of my ex-wife. And I decided to get out so that I could be there. And once I got out after
So let me ask you this, did your drinking cause any problems in the Marine Corps? Did your drinking cause you to have any problems with the Marine Corps?
no, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Well, let's fast forward and talk about how you have spent the last 43 years. I noticed that you only have had 2 disciplinary write-ups in 43 years, which is very commendable. Your last write-up was almost 30 years ago in 1994. Do you remember what that was for?
Yes, ma'am.
What was that about?
It was I was working in the mattress factory as the clerk, and they had a new man that come in that my boss wanted him to know what the paperwork was like and what he had to do. But he had a problem that he was trying to be a good guy to everybody, and he took and just took my hot coffee, and was giving it away. And I tried to take and explain it to him that that's not the way it's done. And being in the penitentiary, you cannot allow anyone to take anything from you. And at that time, which was back in 1994, it was still
So what did you do to get a write-up?
they put it down as a fight. It was one blow thrown. It was him. And he didn't throw any more of them. And finally he listened to me talking to him. And when I was talking to him, the security guard come in and he's put it down as we were fighting.
Okay, so it was for a fight. That was the write-up you got, was for fighting, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, let's talk about some of the programs you have taken. Tell us about what programs have you taken to address your drinking?
As soon as I got to the penitentiary in 1984 and the first in 1985, I joined the AA group at Maine Prison. Went through the steps and everything like that. And after being an alcoholic, and I made an honest inventory of myself and realized that I needed help. And I moved forward. I also learned that AA isn't just about me. It's helping someone else.
When did you participate in AA?
In 1985,
For how long?
about
The reason I'm
about
asking,
6 years.
I might have overlooked it, but I don't see any documentation of AA participation. I don't see that in the file, okay? I'm just pointing that out. I show that you've taken Cage Your Rage.
Yes, ma'am.
That was in 17, Thinking for a Change in 18, Victim Awareness in 19, Pre-Release Phase 1 and 2 in 2023. Does that sound about right?
Yes, ma'am. And the 100 hours
That's
covered
pretty-
alcohol.
Well,
And
not in depth. Not in depth. Why is there such a long gap between the time you came to prison and the time you started taking classes? It's like you didn't really get started with classes until 2017. Why is that?
I joined the Veterans Organization in Maine Prison. And also the other ones, Camp C and then the Camp F.
I see that you've been involved in clubs, but what I'm looking at is, it looks like up until 2017, you hadn't really taken any kind of programs, and I'm trying to find out why you spent, over 30 years in prison before you started taking programs.
That's because it was made available to me at that time. And I had time for 'em. Everything before that, I was working at a job.
Given your situation, you didn't think it would be better to take some programs that would help you try to figure out what got you there and to make sure you don't make some of the same choices again? I'm just concerned about your lack of participation in any substance abuse programs, not living in balance, not celebrate recovery. I'm just not seeing any work being put in to dealing with your problem with drinking.
I
Well,
dealt with it. I
Go ahead.
dealt with it.
I didn't hear you.
I said, ma'am, I dealt with that problem when I first got there. And I learned what I had to do, who I had to talk to, and how I had to take it, come down on myself and to be harder, making harder decisions. And I wasn't under the influence of alcohol, and I haven't had a drink in over 43 years.
Tell me about victim awareness. I don't need to know when you took it. I just need to know, what did you learn from it?
Well, I realized I had to be more considerate about what my victim's family and his friends and my family and my friends and associates taking responsibility for my own actions, no matter what they are and what they relate to.
Let me ask you this. What do you think, how do you think your actions affected Mr. Cole's family and his friends? Tell me about that.
Well, I had the opportunity to speak to his two children,
Friday.
his daughter and his son. And they explained how they felt and how they had reacted at that time of the
I understand that. But even before that, Mr. Woodcock, you didn't give any thought to what you did and how you hurt so many people?
yes, ma'am, sure have, every day of my life.
So what are your thoughts?
My thought is I had to change and I had to become harder
No,
on myself.
your thoughts about the Cole family. Tell me what your thoughts have been about the Cole family.
Well, I had tried to figure out what they were thinking and if just what they were going through at that time or even
Well, what did
since
you figure out? You said you tried to figure it out. So what did you figure out about what they were feeling and thinking?
Excuse me, ma'am? I didn't understand.
She asked you what you figured out about what the Coles were going through because of the murder.
I figured out that it affected them psychologically, mentally, and physically. affected their grandmother and their grandfather, their mother, and the sisters and brothers of the Cole family. I knew it was a very difficult time for them, you know, having not having the opportunity to have a conversation with him or be with him or enjoy their time together.
Warren, what information can you give us about Mr. Woodcock?
You know, since he first came here to us in 1984, he did in fact work, and he worked various jobs for us throughout the 80s, 90s. He worked print shop, mattress factory, and did some maintenance for us, plumbing crew. The last, probably looking at it, from 2004 until just a couple of years ago, we'll say in 15, he went to the clothing room, but he worked for us in the rifle range. So he has had jobs with us that have been jobs of responsibility, especially around the rifle range where we had live rounds, we had guns constantly there. He worked around there. We never had any problems with him in that respect. And it wasn't until getting into 17, 18, when he started working at Camp F in the clothing room for us. You know, from the standpoint of his medical right now, he does have several underlying comorbidities related to chronic kidney disease, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes, glaucoma. So right now, as well as his job that he does have, he's got frequent specialty clinic appointments through neurology, nephrology, and cardiology.
All right, thank you. Mr. Woodcock, I see that you have a walker. Why do you have to have a walker?
I have 3 vertebrae in my lower back. The top one and the bottom are squeezing the one in between. And it's affecting my nerves, and my left leg doesn't work very often because of that. And I've been to the doctors to see about it. The x-rayed, had an epidural, and
So you have a compressed disc,
yes, ma'am.
okay? And what about your diabetes? Is it under control?
What was
Your
that?
diabetes, is it under control?
As far as I know, I don't have diabetes.
Oh, okay, so the word.
I don't take no medicine for it.
That's fine.
Don't take any medicine.
And when did you develop any hearing issues?
I've had the hearing issue for maybe almost 10 years. I've been going to the doctor, and they'll give me a test. I've even been to New Orleans to the hospital down there where they put you in the enclosed booth and the headphones
All right,
and different tones.
okay, that's fine. I show that you have an aortic aneurysm, glaucoma, and then it says pre-diabetes. So you haven't officially crossed over into diabetes, but you have pre-diabetes. So if you were to be successful, Mr. Woodcock, I know that the Parole project has indicated their willingness to extend their services to you in the short term, but in the long term, what's your plan?
Well, my plan is to take advantage of, the parole project if it's possible. To learn, more about society and what is required for an individual. As for, a place to live, I have my sister who lives in Mobile, Alabama, along with her children. And she has offered to allow me to stay with her. And she's a registered nurse. So one of the things about medical problems is as soon as I can, I will go to the VA hospital and try to get something done. And at least they'll take it, do all kind of tests on me, and they'll make up their mind whether I can qualify for an epidural or a laser.
I didn't mean specifically your health, but just in general, how you're gonna be able to live and support yourself or be supported. Have you ever been diagnosed with any kind of mental health issue?
Yes, ma'am. A long time ago. 1957, in the Army, I had to go see a psychiatrist.
Why?
Also,
Why?
Just why?
why? I had an argument with another recruit, and they broke up the fight before we could throw in the blows like that. But he had to go see the psychiatrist, and so did I. And I guess it was just
I
safety
think that they just send you to, I mean, I'm sure recruits fight all the time. I don't think that's anything that's unusual. So why would they think that you needed to see a psychiatrist?
Ma'am, I couldn't tell you that. That's the Army. They do things different than civilians.
Is that the only time you've seen a psychiatrist or been treated for any mental health issues?
No, ma'am. In 1962, while I was in boot camp in the Marine Corps, they saw this in my record and they wanted to know what it was about. And they called me in for observation and a discussion. And then after that, I didn't have to go back at all. They just
Okay, thank you, Mr. Woodcock. I appreciate it. Renata, that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Mr. Woodcock, we're going to hear from the folks who want to speak in support. So first, could we hear from Ms. Faith?
And we truly believe that he's not the same person as he was when he was 38-year-old man when this crime was committed. We'd love to see him be able to come home and spend what years he's got left with his loved ones. His sons would love to have some time with their father that they've greatly missed because they were 6 and 7 years old when they were separated from him. And the 2 siblings he has left would love to be able to finally see him come home as well. And again, I thank you for the work you do as a board, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Okay. All right. We'll hear from the opposition now. For those of you who are here, I don't know who wants to go first. I'll let you choose.
Hi, my name is Charlene Cole Roth. My dad is only brother. My dad changed at night, that morning, and he had to go identify that body. It's never been the same. My mom and dad have both passed. And my sister and I, they said that we were going to carry this on as long as it meant. They didn't get out. My mom, through her dementia, always was scared that somebody was going to find her and hurt her also. And that's why we're here today. So that it's not allowed to happen to anybody else. And have their family go through what our family just gone through. My grandmother, my grandfather died not long after my uncle. My grandfather was destroyed, tempted, buried his son. And not long after that, my grandmother couldn't deal with it anymore. So that's why I'm here today for my family, because Lon doesn't get the chance to see the light of day again, to spend another moment with his family. Thank you.
My name is Pam, and Army Cole is my dad. And in 1978, in December of 1978, 4 days before Christmas, I received a phone call at my job from my grandfather telling me that my daddy was killed. I think that was the worst day of my life, of my family's life. Even though my mother and father were divorced for many, many years, he was still my daddy. He did not deserve what he got. Like Charlene says, my grandmother and my grandfather died before they ever got to see my daddy's killer brought to justice. In 1982, George Woodcock was sentenced to first-degree murder for the killing of Armin Cole. He received a life sentence the rest of his natural life. No benefit of parole, pardon, or suspension of sentence. I understand that George is 83 years old. I understand that he has served 43 years in prison. But my daddy's been dead for 45. He never got a chance in life to live, to be 83 years old. That was taken away from him. He was taken away from me. He was taken away from my family. My family highly opposes his commutation. We feel that my daddy and my grandparents should be able to rest in eternal peace. Please, please deny George Woodcock commutation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Scott Cole. Colleen. Am I out? Yeah. Colleen.
Oh, okay.
No.
There's wrong emotion. There's a couple of things. We're here to see if George is rehabilitated. I mean, that's the big question. And I mean, in his own words, in his applications, he's mentioned, I hear that his sister is a nurse. I mean, the guy is admitting that he's under psychiatric care with a nurse. I would imagine he's being medicated. We were told we can't say anything after meeting with him, but he admitted that he met with us. So I'm going to say, he says he suffers from paranoia, and that this paranoia started at age 15. So we don't have files that maybe you have there, but my concern is that there may still be a psychiatric issue going on. And if you read the timeline of this guy's life, it's like this guy seems to do better when he's in a controlled environment. From 1940 to 1956, he was under parental control. At 16, he ran away and dropped out of school. From 57 to 60, he was in a controlled environment. He was in the Army. He gets out of the Army in 60. His first crime is a burglary. 61, because of this burglary. Somehow he joined the Marines in 61 to 76. He tells us that he was retired out of the Marines, but I believe in the files that our family was able to access it. And he didn't put this on his applications, but he committed a crime in 76, 2 crimes, burglary in Hawaii. He was under investigation for that. And a third crime, conspiracy to commit. And I believe that the Marines didn't want it. And I heard what he said again today about his ex-wife, Connie, and his children are hearing this from the start. But you don't retire from the Marines on an $800 pension back in 1976 and think you're going to support 5 children because she had mental illness, right? She divorced him. Right? He paid child support out of that pension. It truly was. And I think the drinking, he admits it, he says right here, I served in Vietnam, Germany, and other Parole. I retired from the military in 76 because of family problems. That's what he said today. And my drinking became increasingly worse when I returned to civilian life. We're determining today if this guy is capable of returning to civilian life. So the 2 crimes in 76, and then he murders our father in 78. And then he's arrested in 80. Yeah, sobriety. He quit because he can't have a drink, right? And he hasn't even gone through the steps of sobriety. Thank you for asking the question. You talk about sobriety and what did you learn? I don't think you learned anything. So this was hard for me. I told my sister, I can't, they want me to make a decision, can this guy get out? And I want to be fair. But the more that I delved into this guy's life, it's like, he's shown no remorse to us. We were told by Gail Gannon, he can't contact us. Well, you know what, his attorney could contact us. Somebody could send us a letter and say, I'm sorry. His brother-in-law says he met with George and he has been a victim. And he's saying he's remorseful. Words have meaning. And we've never heard the words. We met with them on Friday. My sister had to say a 2.5-hour meeting. Are you sorry? And his first response was, I'll tell you at the end. So I don't think he's rehabilitated. I don't think sobriety has worked for him. And you know what I think is going to happen? And if he does get out, I'll never know, but I think he's going to have a drink. And I think if he gets off of his medications, elderly people can still stab people or kill them. He tells me in his application he wants to go to the VA groups and to the AA groups. I'll tell you, there aren't model citizens in these groups. And if he can be influenced by someone, or if he can influence someone, I mean, that would be an awful thing. But it's like I said, we can't determine what's in this guy's mind and heart. All we have to do is ask him questions and see what's in those applications. And so today I say, as much as it's hard, I think this guy needs to stay in a controlled environment. And I think it needs to be within a situation like he's in now. I mean, I realize he's old. My heart goes out to his family. But it's like my sister and my cousin said, our father's not here. He never got to be old. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. All right, Mr. Woodcock, is there anything you want to say to the board before we turn it over to Mr. Lancaster?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, members of the board. I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to appear before you today. I have been incarcerated for 43 years for killing Mr. Armengol. I have had many years to reflect on the pain and suffering I has caused Mr. Armengol's family. I deeply regret my actions that night. Since my incarceration, I have grown old and matured as well. I am not the same man I was 44 years ago. I worked until I have some major medical issues. I have participated in a number of programs. I have learned to be a better person than I was 44 years ago. I believe I have done everything possible to ensure my change and growth while incarcerated. And I thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lancaster?
Thank you. Mr. Woodcock came to Angola in 1982, at a time, well, 1984, at a time in which many of the programs that people come before the board today didn't have available early on in his incarceration. He did in 1985 participate fully in Alcoholics Anonymous. There is a certificate. I understand from Ms. Jackson's questions that there was no information about that in the official packet, but in the information that I submitted, there is a certificate of his completion of Alcoholics Anonymous at that point. He did work the 12 steps. He then focused on work. If you look at Mr. Woodcock's job assignments throughout the period of his incarceration, he worked consistently and in positions of trust, in positions of responsibility. As the warden mentioned, he worked for an extended period of time in the rifle range, which is a position of tremendous trust given the nature of that work being around guns, live firearms. It's also a place in which you folks are trained, and Mr. Woodcock was given that position of trust. He's been at Camp F for a very long period of time. That's the trustee camp. He's been a Class A trustee, I think, for over 30 years. He has been institutionally compliant. I know there were some questions of his write-ups. As mentioned, he only has 2. His first one, I think, only resulted in a sentence of 5 days. And the second one, the fight that was mentioned, that sentence was actually suspended. Based on his success in prison and his completion of programs, we would request that this board recommend clemency for Mr. Woodcock. I know that there are considerable questions about this crime. The state's theory behind this crime was that it was a murder for hire, 3 co-defendants, Mr. Woodcock's sister, John Paul Fallon. John Paul Fallon was granted immunity for turning state's evidence. And so much of the facts that came out at trial, much of the facts that are in the official record were facts that really came from Mr. Fallon, in that he was really the principal witness in this case, having turned state's evidence for that testimony. The other point that I would just like to make, and this is really goes to the importance of clemency. At the time that Mr. Woodcock was sentenced for first-degree murder, the sentence of life in prison was a mandatory sentence. The judge didn't have the ability, nor even the facts of the ability for Mr. Woodcock to rehabilitate himself and change over the years. And the important thing about clemency is that it does offer people the opportunity who did receive sentences of life without the opportunity for parole to have some consideration about their development over their period of incarceration. And Mr. Woodcock's 43 years of incarceration is one that demonstrates that he is compliant with the rules. He is compliant with his medical treatment, would continue to do so should he be released. He's going to be surrounded. If he is released, he has an out-of-state plan to go to Alabama, where he will live with his sister. Right next door is a niece. Just a few blocks away are other family members. So he will be surrounded by support. Family also is around the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Mr. Weatherford will be available to assist as well. He'll also, participate in, Alcoholics Anonymous once he's out. And the reason for that primarily is that he does understand that that transition is one that will be different from his experience in prison, and he will utilize that support structure to continue to maintain his sobriety. So with the information that's presented at the hearing today, we request that he gain a recommendation for consideration of clemency. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I'd like to ask for an executive session.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jackson and a second by Mr. Roche for executive session to discuss confidential matters. You do a roll call, please.
Ms. Jackson?
Yeah.
Mr. Rozier?
Yes.
Ms. Renatza?
Yes.
Mr. Marabella?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
All right, so stand by. We'll be in executive session to discuss confidential matters. We'll be back shortly. Okay, we are back in regular session. Prepare to vote. Mrs. Jackson will be voting first.
First, I'd like to thank all of our participants here today, and those who are at prison. And I want you to know that we've taken consideration every week. We don't disregard anybody's feelings or opinions. And so I'd like to thank the Armand family for your input, as well as the supporters of Mr. Woodcock. These are all different cases. Mondays suck, because Monday is always party day. And so they're always really difficult cases. And we take our responsibility very seriously. Assure you of that. I want to start by saying, particularly to Mr. Armand's son, you don't carry the burden of the responsibility of the decision. That's not on your shoulders. That's not on any of your shoulders. That's on our shoulders. We took on this responsibility and we carry the weight of it. So I want you to lift that up off your shoulders. It does not rest on you. Our responsibility is to look at a lot of factors. We do look at the crime, and They're all bad. They've all caused harm that continues. But the offender can't control what he's done in the past or the crime that brought him in. The only thing that they can do is move forward. And our responsibility is to look at that particular person and answer for ourselves. Do we think this person can be released to society? And we look at a lot of factors. Among those are, what has he done over the last 43 years or 30 years or however long that person has been incarcerated? What is their disciplinary record look like? How does the institution regard them? What level of trust do they put in that individual? And whether or not that person is going to be released with some sort of safety in place. And so those are the factors that I look at personally, and we all have our own, varying importance that we give to each one. So I want you to know that we don't take these decisions lightly at all. As I examine Mr. Woodcock's case, I'll say Mr. Woodcock did not interview well today, but not everybody does. And we learn to accept that. Some people are very glib speakers, but they're not ready. And then you have people like Mr. Woodcock who really doesn't present very well. And so you look at, well, how has he conducted himself over the last 43 years? Maybe that speaks more for him than this window that we get today. And so as I've looked at Mr. Woodcock, I feel that he is rehabilitated, even though he may not articulate it as well as I would like. I look at the fact that for 43 years, he's only had 2 write-ups. We've had people with hundreds of write-ups. He has held a position of trust within the institution. They don't let anybody be around the gun range. So there has to be a level of trust that they have in him. He has the support of the Louisiana Parole Project, so that if a governor should choose to sign a commutation, he would go to the Louisiana Parole Project to be reacclimated into society. Things have changed in 43 years, and he also has a good support system from his family, and he would be outside of the state of Louisiana. He has some serious health issues as well. And the longer he is incarcerated, the more those health issues will become the burden and the responsibility of the staff at the prison to care for him. That's a small factor, but it's also a factor. So for me personally, my vote would be to recommend to the governor that Mr. Woodcock's sentence be commuted to 99 years.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. Mr. Rushing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank the family for coming and sharing with us, and because a part of this process is the victim's input. The victim's input is very important. And as the victim advocate on this board, I understand that you are still physically, mentally, and emotionally affected by the death of your loved one. But there comes a time when you have to think about yourself. As Mrs. Jackson said, you can't carry the burden of this man's crime the rest of your life. Because you will create a prison within itself for yourself. You have to live life to the fullest. You can't do that without forgiveness, without anything. But as a victim advocate on this board, I'd like to vote in solidarity with the family and deny Mr. Woodcock his clemency. But you must remember that you have a life to live and you cannot live it within a prison created by yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to likewise thank everyone for coming. We certainly hear what you have to say. Judge Jackson was very articulate, pointing out what our rules, what we look for and what we have to do. And based upon what I believe my responsibility is, I agree with Judge Jackson. I vote likewise is going to be to recommend to the governor that he grant a commutation to 99 years.
Mr. Freeman?
You know, all our cases are difficult. And this one was really hard to listen to, understand. I don't understand. It's never happened to me, but I'm sure there's a lot of pain and anguish that go through on both sides. But listening to what I've heard today, my vote is to commute his sentence to 99 years.
All right, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Mr. Woodcock, my vote today is also that to make the recommendation your sentence be commuted. That's based on your age, the length of incarceration, the fact that you have an out-of-state plan, you have the support of the parole project, and the things that Warden Falvey has said on your behalf. So you received one vote that was not in favor, but 4 votes that were favorable. So we will make the recommendation on your behalf that your sentence be commuted to 99 years.
Wow. Words of wisdom by Mr. No Way Roche. Now, remember, we're going to come back to the present day 2024, where he now has his parole hearing. So this means the governor signed off the recommendation to commute, and now we're going to see his parole hearing with the new parole board. Before we do that, I'm going to go over, this is the list. The Governor Edwards, before he left office, commuted 56 inmates. And we are on a mission, Sir Richard and I, to cover every single one of these 56 parole hearings. So as you can see here, this is right here, George Woodcock. And it's interesting, they got him for first-degree battery, right? It just goes to show you, when you look at whatever plea deals people take, the corresponding crime on their record oftentimes can have nothing to do with what they're locked up for. So always keep that in mind if you ever hear somebody debating people with life sentences for certain crimes. And here's the spreadsheet that Sir Richard put together. As you can see, we are being methodical about going through, we call it the Governor Edwards Purge, the election year. So we're going through each name and then when their corresponding dates were for their commutation hearings and then parole hearings. And we're going down the list one by one. And we've actually created a playlist. If you want to see these hearings, check out the playlist below. It's called The Purge. And if you want to see all of these specific hearings, and we're going to keep track on what percentage got commuted, what percentage then got paroled, and then we're going to keep tabs on it to see what percentage gets revoked. And that's going to be interesting to keep our tabs on. I think we're building a library that is really worth something to, hey, maybe a potential future PhD out there. Now, we're going to watch this parole hearing and then I'll unpack it with the details that we have at the end. So I'm going to wait until we go over his appeal with the unpacking. And I'm also going to skip over or fast forward again his supporting statements. It's not only to fast forward. I'm not doing it specifically to be rude or disrespectful to the support. The problem is this hearing would have been way over 2.5 hours. And also the quality of the sound, because they were speaking from the stage, it was just not there. So those are the reasons for skipping it over. It's not about being disrespectful per se. So with that, let's jump in.
Would you please say your name and DOC number?
Mr. Woodcock has a hearing aid. He's hard of hearing, so I'll have to ask.
Okay, Mr. Plank,
a second time. So he's asking for your name and DOC number.
Yes, sir. I'm George Woodcock Jr. And my DOC number is 103702.
Hey, thank you, sir. Okay, Mr. Woodcock, today we're here for your parole hearing. You're a first felony offender. You are convicted of first-degree murder. You were given life. That sentence was commuted to 99 years by Governor Edwards. Your parole date is 10/27/23. Your adjusted good time date is 11/24/2028, and your full term date is 2079. Before we get started, I can see that, Mr. Woodcock, you do have a medical condition, and I know Dr. Cleveland's there. Dr. Cleveland, would you tell us, Mr. Woodcock's ailment?
He has a history of high blood pressure, high cholesterol, chronic kidney failure, atrial fibrillation, glaucoma. He's hard of hearing. He has type 2 diabetes. He had an aortic valve replacement due to a heart condition, a valvular heart condition. He's obese and he has had a hip fracture in the past. Recently, like last night, he fell and hit his head and spent last night and probably the next day or so will be in our medical unit here at the medical department. Nursing unit.
So he's permanently housed at the nursing unit?
No, he'll be there probably for a few days to be sure that he's gonna be okay.
Okay. Sure.
Dr. Cleveland, the ailments that Mr. Woodcock suffers are not severe enough that he would be considered for medical parole. Is that correct, or?
Not at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Tillis, you have any questions for the doctor?
No.
Okay, doctor. We thank you, Dr. Cleveland, for being here with us this morning and giving us that information. Okay, Mr. Woodcock, I know it's going to be a little hard. Mr. Lancaster, maybe you can help him out a little bit by repeating my questions, but I need to know a little bit about what he did and why does he think he should be paroled today?
Did you hear the question?
Some about a little bit of the why.
Yes, so the question was a little bit of information about what brought you into prison and why you feel you need parole.
Yes, sir.
Can you answer the question or?
No, doctor said not to.
Okay, you need to answer his question though.
I was working under an assumption from somebody gave me information about Mr. Cole. And at that time, I wasn't a very nice person. I had a lot of problems. Mainly, alcohol. My wife. And I was trying to get a job, and I was going to college. It was a junior college.
So what have you been doing while you've been in prison that's prepared you for parole?
Since I've been in prison, first thing I did got it with the AA program that they have here at the penitentiary. Completed that program in the 12 steps. And then after that, I went to work as a orderly clerk at the mattress factory. And the regular library. And also I worked in the blocks. And then on the my last real job was working at the rifle range.
All right, thank you. Okay, now we're gonna speak to the warden. Warden, you have any comments to make about Mr. Woodcock?
Yes, Mr. Woodcock has been a minimum aid, trustee here for the last 30-some years. He recently worked as a janitor cleaner until his health started declining. He only had 2 DV reports since he's been here in the 42 years. He also has taken 100 hours victim awareness, T4C, anger management, substance abuse, and his tiger is low. He's a high school graduate, and he was in the military service. He served both the Army and the Marines and was discharged honorably, and he's a retired vet. Mr. Woodcock has been a model offender here at the institution with minimum trouble at all until his recent decline in his health. He participated in almost anything that anybody asked him to do for them.
Thank you, Warden Ambo. Okay, next we're gonna speak to the support, Mr. Kerry Myers from the Parole Project. Okay, thank you, Mr. Myers. Next, we'll have George Woodcock Jr., his son.
It's your son. It's your son. He's
Yes, I'm George Woodcock III. He'll be staying with me in Michigan if he is paroled. We do have a good, decent sized house, working on bedrooms for him. We're getting everything set up, but once we do have a decision, we'll make better decisions. And also, I've been helping vets for past 10 to 15 years with a VA rep. So getting him set up in that situation will also help him, and we'll get those services that he needs.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and next we have Alan Weatherford, uncle.
Good morning. My name is Alan Weatherford. And he's George's my uncle and Armin Foles. And don't stand here lightly for y'all of victim's family. After careful consideration over the years, I'm here. I've worked in law enforcement for 40 years, 7 years as chief of police in Gulfport. I retired in 2013, graduate of the FBI Academy, Southern Police Institute. So I've been around law enforcement. And worked closely with Mississippi Department of Corrections in the past on the Interstate Compact Act. And I do appreciate and understand the important role of it, because it's not easy. But George Woodcock, 11 and 12 years old, I remember talking to him about his career and the Marines there. He was bound on his customs and Marine Corps, and anybody that's worked in Marine Corps, Marines that have been retired, you kind of understand what I'm saying there. He had a great sense of humor. When he was arrested in the 1980s, I was shocked, I was saddened, and I was mad. I'm not going to sit here and deny it. Look forward to visiting George, but then go to prison there over the years and the respect that he had. Spent a considerable amount of time with him, talking to him there. Meeting a law enforcement, I'm picking his brain there. It's very difficult to build that relationship there, but I have there. Well, and long story short, in 2011, my daughter was killed by a gunshot. And the victimization side of it, of me not being in law enforcement there, that process there rocked our world, rocked our family there. Young man that killed her, we did not oppose him. He's out on parole now. We did not oppose that. I do believe I do believe there. So I spent a considerable amount of time talking to George about victimization, about the loss there, not only to our family, but the Cole family there. What he did to the entire family. He completely understands that. I spent a considerable amount of time talking to him. And I know that his daughter, Faith Cole, is not opposed to him getting out. I believe there may be a letter. And I will say this to the family. I know it's difficult being here today, and I say this to you, I am sorry.
Well, we want him to we want him to say sorry. I can leave it wrong. I can leave it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to talk about it.
Well,
You know what? I just talked to this guy months ago, and I think this is a farce.
I'm going to tell you, and just asking that you consider, based on his record, being there for 24 years there, that we're here for him. I can tell you, I don't stand here lightly here today. If I had any concern whatsoever about public safety there, I would not be standing for you. And I can assure you, this board, and to everyone in this room, that I will do my part to be a part of the Louisiana Parole project there to assist him in him getting out, if he does, if he is. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Okay, now we will go to his attorney, Mr. Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Thank you, Ms. Ledoux and Mr. Tillis. Because of Mr. Woodcock's current health issue, if the board would give me a little latitude in giving a little bit of explanation as to what led him to prison and also what he's accomplished while he's been in prison. Also, if there are matters that come up during the interview, I'll reserve the right at the end to help maybe clarify any issues that come up during the interview. Mr. Woodcock is now 84 years old. He came to prison 42 years ago. At the time this crime was committed, Mr. Woodcock had recently retired from 20 years service in the military. He initially started in the Army where he was a paratrooper, and then was honorably discharged, spent a little bit of time, and then re-enlisted and served time in the Marines in active combat. Multiple deployments in active combat, and then after combat, very important positions securing embassies across the globe in Germany and Japan, and assignments throughout the world. He returns to Gulfport, Mississippi. His alcohol issues had increased. He was a severe alcoholic, and his alcoholism was impacting his life. He had marital issues, which were also impacting his life. All of that contributed, in no way creates an excuse, but gives some context to the events that led him to prison. The crime involved his sister, who was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, and a co-defendant, who was given complete immunity for his testimony, although the appellate court in Woodcock's case did find that the co-defendant was involved in the murder. However, he received no conviction or any jail time for assisting the state in the conviction. Since Mr. Woodcock has been in prison, he's addressed those issues which were part of his life at the time the crime occurred. He became actively involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. He has taken substance abuse courses, including Thinking for a Change. So the other issues he's addressed as well. He's got a proven track record in work and has been given important job assignments throughout his time in prison. He's been a Class A trustee for decades. His last write-up, he only has 2 write-ups in his record. Those were over 30 years ago. And one of those write-ups, the last write-up, there was a suspended sentence on it. So the institution did not sort of take that write-up seriously, as indicated by their suspension of sentence. His Tiger score is incredibly low. So the risk assessment that's utilized by the Department of Corrections, which has been scientifically tested, indicates that he's extremely low risk of any recidivism, as well as his advanced age, being 84 years old, and his health issues. There is an extreme, really a nil likelihood, if any, of any reoffense. He's also been actively engaged in community service while he's been in prison. And we know that an offender's active engagement in the community of prison in positive ways is indicative of their character, and that being long-standing over many decades as active engagement. So his behavior and character indications while he's been in prison are very different than this one offense that he committed as a first offender. He's been active in the Viet Vets organization here, actually started the chapter at Camp F, has been president of that chapter. It's been nationally recognized. As Mr. Myers indicated, he's been involved in the Moving Wall project. And one important piece of that is that project takes place outside of the prison, where members of the offender population go into the community, put those walls together in community events. So he's been trusted to go outside the gate. He's got a solid reentry plan with the Louisiana Parole Project. Ms. Sturgeon here at the prison is setting him up with his VA benefits, working with the Louisiana Department of Veterans Affairs. The Parole Project will assist him with that. Once he has established his benefits with the VA, all of that will transfer to Michigan, where he will reside with his son and be able to get the services that he needs in Michigan. With that, I will respectfully request that the committee grant Mr. Woodcock's request for parole. I've been working with Mr. Woodcock for quite some time. I assisted him on his clemency application. Lately, I've been meeting with him at the prison once a week. His health has declined. He does have needs which we have arranged in his reentry plan to be met. But those current needs, create burdens on the system here that can be met outside of the institution through services that are offered by the Veterans Administration. So we respectfully request that he be granted parole today to Louisiana Parole Project with the Interstate Compact to Michigan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're gonna go to the opposition. Mr. David Altman.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to speak.
Yes, sir.
My uncle was murdered by Mr. Woodcock, who shot him 3 times behind while he was going down the stairs when he was walking in his own home. The death traumatized our family. My grandfather, Armand Cole Sr., died soon afterward. My grandmother spiraled down in tremendous grief and never regained full control of her mind. The insurance money of my uncle was stolen by Mr. Woodcock and his sister, leaving his children, my younger cousins, Pam and Scott, without funds to recover, and they soon had to leave their hometown to start a new life. The police told our family that Mr. Woodcock was a murderer for hire who was implicated in several other killings in various states. Our understanding was Mr. Woodcock received a life sentence with no possibility of parole. But amazing to me, my cousin Scott told me upon hearing of a possibility of a pardon that he would support this request if he could meet in person with Mr. Woodcock and see if he would apologize to him for his crime. Scott traveled across the country for this meeting, received no apology from Mr. Woodcock. Our family humbly asks the board for justice. Please deny this request. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, Miss Pam, no?
Thank you. The one thing that I want y'all to realize is the person who is the victim in this case, which was Armand Cole. Okay, he was brutally murdered. It was premeditated by my stepmother. And they did it for money. You know, my father and my mother had been divorced for years. My father remarried. He took care of Betty, which was his wife at the time. They were estranged. But the fact remains that I don't, as old as I am, can't still comprehend how we can allow someone who cold-bloodedly killed another individual the opportunity to breathe fresh air and be paroled. I can't wrap my head around that. Now I'm understanding that George is not going to Alabama to his sisters. Now he's going to Michigan. That was never, you know, told to my brother and I that there's a change of where he's going. My brother lives in Michigan. My brother doesn't live very far from where George Woodcock is going to go. And I don't think that it's fair for the family for this man to go out. Yeah, he's 84. He's not in good health, okay? But he murdered an individual in cold blood, premeditated. This was planned for a very long time, and then it happened. It happened during Christmas. This is what I got a call at work 2 days before Christmas that my father was dead. And then it has snowballed to this. I am not a resentful person. I am not any of that, but I don't feel that, you know, you three have the power. You have the power to keep this man in there, okay? I don't care how sick he is. He was given life with no parole. Life. He's still alive. He's not dead yet. And all I ask is that you keep him in it. They seem to be taking very good care of him right now. You know, I just want you to remember that the victim in this case is only Cole. He was murdered, okay? And I want you to consider that because our family has gone through a lot of stuff. I've lost all my uncles and aunts. I've lost my grandparents because of this. They died way too young. They couldn't handle it. My daddy was the firstborn. And my aunt and my uncle saw it all through and they have deceased. So now it's up to the cousins and there's not many of us. So please take into consideration that George Woodcock is not the man that, yeah, he's remorseful. What is he gonna do at the age of 84? But it's just the idea that he murdered my father in cold blood for money. For money. And I just, that's all I would like to say.
Thank you, ma'am, for coming. We appreciate it. Darlene LeBlanc.
Hi.
Hi.
I've been listening to things and all these accomplishments that Woodcock has achieved to be supposedly a good person. My uncle never got a chance. He never got the chance to demonstrate what his achievements were. And I don't have the responsibility for that. That's how we were brought up as a family. You ask any of our friends about the Cole family, they'll tell you if one Cole goes, then maybe 10 Cole go to do that. Spend time with my whole family with special occasions or last minute get togethers, whatever it was, but that changed in December of 1970. Natural death in your family or part of your life that you come to accept, but not more, and I'm not going to accept. Why was money worth killing my uncle? Why? It's just money. Why did my uncle didn't see the evil in Betty and George Woodcock? We don't know. Why should George Woodcock, who was sentenced to life imprisonment, like y'all, all family members can say, first degree murder, get out of the prison? Because of his age, everybody gets old. But it's like you go back on your word. He was found guilty, and now it's like he's not guilty, and he can go free. I don't think freedom should be part of his life. Thank you.
Okay. That's all of our speakers. Now we have, this case has been assigned to Mr. Tillis. Mr. Tillis will ask a few questions of the offender.
Good morning, Mr. Woodcock. How are you? And I guess I understand that he has a hearing problem. Would you relate to him? I wanted to ask the question, if he is remorseful and has he ever reached out to the family?
He can't.
No. He can't.
Can't reach out to the family.
Okay. Is he remorseful? Ask him, is he remorseful?
The question that Mr. Tillis is asking you is, are you remorseful for your crime? Can you speak to that? Can you speak to that?
I'm sorry I did that, but I really don't have any excuse. Except I'm a recovering alcoholic. And when I get on a lot of alcoholic, there ain't nothing I can't do.
Mr. Tillis, Mr. Woodcock did, as part of the victims awareness, that program has participants write a victim accountability letter. That's included in the packet I submitted to you.
Yeah, I saw it. I went through it. I went through this case 2 or 3 times, trying to figure out, why. He's done a good job. Since he's been there, it seems like he's changed. So I have no more questions.
So, do you have any questions?
No.
What happened to the insurance policy? Was it paid out to the daughter?
Mr. Pritton's asking you, what happened to the insurance policy?
The insurance company paid my sister.
Do we know how much that policy was worth?
There wasn't any problem with the insurance company.
The question was, do you recall how much that policy was worth?
$250,000.
Okay, and did you know you were gonna share in that money?
What do you say?
He said, did you know that you were gonna share it with, in that money?
No, sir.
So this wasn't planned by your sister, and then she was gonna give you part of the money.
Mr. Primm's asking you about the plans with your sister.
All she did was provide me with information.
So you gotta kind of explain to me, I mean, what was the thought process behind this murder? Why did you kill him?
Mr. Primm's question is, what is the thought process behind the murder? Why did you kill him?
Say again?
The question is your thought process at the time of the murder.
As close as I can remember, sir. I was drinking, and when I'm drinking, like I said, I can do just about anything.
Mr. Prim, the record's always been clear that there was a conspiracy with Mr. Woodcock, his sister, and the co-defendant.
See if he would admit it. That's why I'm questioning. Okay. So I have no further questions. Okay, now we vote. So,
If that remains a concern, I just want to make sure Mr. Woodcock is clear on the questioning. I met with him yesterday after, he went to the infirmary yesterday morning. And I just want to make sure that he's clear on questioning. If that remains an issue for the committee, I can help and pursue that line of questioning a little bit more for the committee.
I think you've already, I read the file. We don't need to clear it up anymore. Like I said, I was just looking for the admission. Is the panel ready to vote?
I would like to go into executive session.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for an executive session to discuss confidential information. Can I have a roll call, please?
Chuck Tillis,
Yes.
Jerry Ledoux,
Yes.
Steve Freeman.
Yes. We will be right back. We're going back to talk about things. All right, we're gonna call this hearing back to order. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Freeman,
Yes.
Mr. Tillis,
Yes.
Mr. Ledoux.
Yes.
Okay, we're back in session now and we are prepared to vote. Mr. Tillis will be the first to vote.
Mr. Woodcock, because of the nature of this crime, and I read it very well, my vote's going to be to deny today.
Mr. Ledoux?
My vote is to deny parole today. You have a good time date of 2028. I know your health is poor. But that's my vote as victim opposition.
Okay. Okay, and well, your parole's already been denied because it takes a unanimous decision. I would have voted to grant it just because of your age and your health and what you've done in prison, but today your parole has been denied.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's unpack this. And Now, what we have here is the appeal made by his sister. Remember, she was charged, sentenced for 20 years, and she actually won this appeal. And I'm not quite sure what happened. She won the right for a retrial based on a hearsay testimony. Because what happened was there was 3 people involved in this crime, and one of the people was given immunity to testify against both him and his sister, and it ended up being hearsay. She was sentenced initially to 20 years. I don't know what happened after her new trial, but Sir Richard did find that she passed away outside of prison at the age of 79 in 2008. And frankly, we're not going to get much additional information on this crime from this appeal either. So they're both good. He's showing me bags of pretzels, and they're both the same bags of pretzels. 2 bags, one in each hand. Which one is good? Okay. So let's open this bag of pretzels. You're welcome. It's squishy, the little one. So, first, how do you feel about this case? It's interesting. They said, well, you're going to get out in 4 years, but if the deterioration on his health is authentic, which I don't think there's any reason to believe it's not. They had the doctor sitting next to him. It's not like they're going to collude with Angola to make it not authentic. And if you saw just from a year before, I mean, was it even a year before? He had his commutation hearing, which we just saw, which was what, 9/18/2023, 8/7/2024 is 11 months later. And he looks just on the way out. I mean, he looks like a different man. Really, in the first hearing, I thought, wow, this guy, he actually looked like he could he looked like he could step back in uniform and be a drill sergeant, Looks like a completely different man here. And I don't know, here we can do like maybe a side by side, but I had it's interesting, I felt like Mr. O'Shea's words resonated with me before, and I have been upset before by certain board members saying things like that, but when you say something and then vote in favor of the victims for that reason, I think that's what makes it okay. But I guess the bottom, like the takeaway here, and Sir Richard has it in the spreadsheet notes, is a certain lack of remorse. You just don't get the remorse from him. And it's like, is his ego too big? Like, what is it? The victim's son came across the country really just to hear an apology. So he comes across the country to hear an apology, and he said that's all he wanted. But the guy then didn't give the apology. He still couldn't do it. And that's why the victim's family came on and just basically saying, and I think that's what the fight was about. When one of the people in support, who was former law enforcement, and said that I think he lost, did he say he lost his daughter? And he's like, well, we forgave that person. And the speech was a little bit holier than art thou, but I guess if you have that life experience, you do have a right to talk about it, saying, look, we did the same thing. But then the victim family in the audience said, well, we want to hear an apology from him. And it seems that that's all that they want. And when you take that into consideration, it's like, you why have empathy for the one who perpetrated the crime and compassion for him if all he has to do, potentially what he had to do, was say sorry? And his ego is too big, he can't say it. So if you're torn, I think all you have to do is fall back and say, man, he's doing it to himself. But it's funny, in other states, this guy would have gotten, a 20-year sentence. He would have been paroled after 15. And here it's like, it's like 45, whatever years later. So Court of Appeals in Louisiana, Fourth Circuit. So this is his sister. So January 16, 1985, there's a rehearing denied. February 26, 1985, writ denied. May 3rd, okay, so, again, this is his sister. This is an appeal by Betty Woodcock from a conviction of conspiracy to commit first-degree red rum in violation of, and whether the trial judge erred in denying the motion to quash, pursuant, relative to the time in which the commenced trial, and 2, whether the judge erred in permitting the introduction of hearsay testimony of an alleged co-conspirator. We find that the trial judge did not err in denying the motion to quash, but he did err in permitting the introduction of the hearsay testimony when it was not permitted to be introduced by prior ruling on that issue. So we remand the case for a new trial. And again, I don't know if they had that new trial or if they just did a plea deal after that or whatnot. And on that note, I wonder if the governor's list, where they say first degree battery, if this is a typo, because that it just doesn't make sense, because I don't think he took a plea deal, right? I don't know. You never know. Anyways, a police investigation led to the grand jury indictment of Betty and her brother George on March 25th, 1980 for first degree, see it's right here, red rum of arm, I'll just say murder. YouTube, do your thing. Amanda Cole and Betty Cole's estranged husband. The state theorized that Armand Cole had been murdered by George Woodcock and his friend Joseph Paul Fallon upon the instructions and directions of Betty Cole for the insurance money. It is interesting. If this is actually the case, and I remember what he said at the beginning, how she claimed that he had been doing these things to children and stuff like that. It almost makes you wonder if he hadn't done this before, if he wasn't a pay for hire in other cases, if he was somehow manipulated by his sister, who seems to be the one that gets away with it, right? I mean, what if, I just didn't feel like I got clarity around that. Imagine if it seems like she might have been the most evil of all of them. Fallon was given immunity to testify against George and Betty, and George Woodcock was subsequently found guilty of first-degree murder. There it is. And sentenced to life in prison. Not battery. It's got to be a typo. On September 30th, 1982, Betty filed a motion in Lamine to limit the testimony of Fallon so as not to include his hearsay testimony. On December 15, 1982, the trial court denied the motion. The state amended the Bill of Information to charge Betty with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder in violation. Okay. Prior to the commencement trial on August 23, 1983, a hearing was held pursuant and to permit the introduction into evidence of hearsay testimony in alleged co-conspirator. After hearing the state's evidence, the trial judge ruled that the state had not made a prima that. Well, if any of you wondered if I'm a PhD or an attorney, when I can't pronounce these words, which everyone is surely pronouncing, these true crime, true crime community, prima facie, showing and conspiracy, and therefore would not allow the hearsay testimony to be admitted into evidence. During trial, defense counsel, upon cross-examination Fallon about his immunity agreement with the state, showed Fallon the immunity agreement and read the first sentence of the agreement aloud. The first sentence states, "The above agreement is based on our understanding that Mr. Fallon has extensive and first-hand knowledge of the involvement of George Woodcock and Betty Cole of the murder victim Amanda Knoll." Fallon indicated that he did not tell the state anything at all, that his lawyer negotiated the agreement with the state. On redirect examination, the state asked Fallon what information he had on Betty Cole. Defense counsel objected on the basis that the information was hearsay, which the objection was overruled by the trial court. Fallon then went on to testify that George told him Betty would pay them out of the insurance proceeds for the murder, and that on that night of the murder, when George came out of Betty's house, he told Fallon that the murder was still on. Defense counsel moved for a mistrial, which was denied. Betty Cole was found guilty by a 12-man jury. On October 4, 1983, the defense counsel filed a motion. 1 minute, squishy. And a motion to post verdict, judgment of acquittal, which were both denied by the trial court. The trial judge then immediately sentenced Betty Cole to 20 years of hard labor. Okay. So, again, they don't go into the details of the crime, but we do find that they did rule in her favor because it says here that after a thorough examination of the entire record, we conclude that in this case, as in Banks Supra, it cannot say beyond a reasonable doubt that the improperly admitted hearsay did not contribute to the verdict. Accordingly, the defendant's conviction and sentence are reversed, and the case is remanded for trial. Okay, it's not every day we find that sentences are reversed. And again, I wonder what happened now. We are about 2 hours into this hearing, and I want to keep it under 2 hours. And I don't really have much to say. I'm like I said, it comes back to me. I'm torn about this. Until if you believe and hear what it is that is being said in terms of they just want an apology and he can't do it, then I just put the blame squarely on him. On he's just got to apologize. And so I guess that's my takeaway. And I'll leave you with Mr. Roche's words, I think, of wisdom. And again, if you want to see more of these hearings from the governor's purge, we are covering all of them one by one by one by one. They're all going to be blast to the past. And we're going to keep track on those that get paroled, those that maybe get revoked, and you can check it out in the playlist below. Thank you, Sir Richard, as always. And with that, I'll let you go.
And as the victim advocate on this board, I understand that you are still physically, mentally, and emotionally affected by the death of your loved one. But there comes a time when you have to think about yourself. As Mrs. Jackson said, you can't carry the burden of this man's crime the rest of your life, because you will create a prison within itself for yourself. You have to live life to the fullest. You can't do that without forgiveness, without empathy. But as a victim advocate on this board, I'd like to vote in solidarity with the family and deny Mr. Woodcock his